In 1996, Purdue Pharma sat on internal data showing OxyContin's addiction rate was nowhere near the number they were telling doctors. And by the time anyone caught on, more than 500,000 Americans were dead from opioid overdoses. The Sackler family walked away with over $10 billion. Not one of them spent a single night in prison. So why has almost no one ever heard the name Curtis Wright? For 20 years, Purdue Pharma was the quiet, respectable family company behind a miracle drug. OxyContin was marketed as a breakthrough, a release painkiller so carefully engineered that doctors were told addiction was almost impossible. Less than 1% risk. That was the number reps repeated in clinics from Florida to rural Maine. The Sacklers themselves stayed mostly invisible, known more for museum wings bearing their name than for anything happening on a factory floor. Purdue looked like any other pharmaceutical company solving a real problem. Chronic pain, undertreated for decades, finally had an answer. That was the image. That was the story everyone bought. But the crack opened almost immediately, and it opened in a memo. By 1997, less than a year after launch, Purdue's own sales and medical staff were getting reports from field reps in places like rural Kentucky and Maine, people crushing the pills, snorting them, injecting them. Internally, Purdue called it abuse and diversion. Executives discussed it in meetings. Richard Sackler, then a senior executive, was on email threads about it, and the response wasn't to pull back the marketing. It was to double down. Sales quotas increased. The less than 1% statistic, the one drilled into every doctor's head, traced back to a single misquoted line from a 5-sentence letter to a medical journal, not a study. Purdue's own scientists knew the actual data didn't support it, so they buried it. Sales reps were sent target lists ranking doctors by how many pills they prescribed. The highest prescribers got the most visits, the biggest gifts, the warmest attention. Internally, some of those doctors were flagged as running what employees called pill mills. Purdue kept calling on them anyway. Meanwhile, the company hired Curtis Wright, the FDA medical reviewer who had approved OxyContin's original label, the one containing that unproven addiction claim, and brought him on board less than 2 years after approval at a 6-figure salary. Nobody in Washington asked many questions. The label stayed on the bottle. The prescriptions kept climbing. But that's not even the part they really didn't want out. In 2007, Purdue executives pled guilty to federal charges of misbranding OxyContin, admitting in writing that they'd misled doctors and regulators about addiction risk for years. The company paid roughly $600 million. It sounded like justice. It wasn't. No Sackler pled guilty to anything. No Sackler faced charges. And in the decade after that plea, after the company had formally admitted to lying, the Sackler family began pulling money out of Purdue faster than ever. Court records later showed the family withdrew more than $10 billion between 2008 and 2018, much of it funneled into trusts and overseas accounts, positioning themselves financially years before Purdue ever filed for bankruptcy. They knew what was coming. They got the money out first. By the time lawsuits from grieving families and state attorneys general started piling up, there was a fortune sitting safely out of reach, and a company left holding nothing but liability. Here's the part that should make you angry. When Purdue finally collapsed into bankruptcy, the Sacklers didn't get sued into oblivion, they negotiated. They agreed to pay a portion back over time in exchange for something extraordinary, total protection from any future civil lawsuits forever related to opioids. A judge signed off. Families who lost children got settlement checks. The family whose name was on the drug got a permanent legal shield. The system that was supposed to hold them accountable instead became the mechanism that protected them. Bankruptcy law, built to help debtors start over, used by billionaires to make a public health catastrophe disappear on paper. And the man who greenlit the label that started it all, Curtis Wright, never faced consequences either. He simply moved on, working in pharmaceuticals for years afterward. So here's the question nobody's really answered. The specific legal tools that let the Sacklers walk away, the bankruptcy shield, the ability to move billions before the lawsuits landed, none of that was illegal. It was just how the system works when you're rich enough to use it. Which means the exact playbook that buried the truth about OxyContin is still sitting there, fully intact, available to the next company willing to use it. So who's using it right now?